The slap didn't just burn my cheek, it incinerated 40 years of motherhood. I'd always believed love could save a broken child, but that night, when he looked at me not as his mother, but as an expired ATM card, I understood. The rules had changed, and I, a 70-year-old woman with hands that trembled from age, would be the one to rewrite them. My name is Margaret Hale, and at 72, I thought I'd seen enough of life to no longer be surprised by cruelty. I was wrong. The living room of my modest suburban home had witnessed countless family moments over 4 decades, but tonight it would become the stage for my unmaking. Daniel stood before me, my only son, 43 years old, with the same hazel eyes that once looked up at me with innocent trust. Now those eyes burned with entitlement and rage. $20,000. Mom, that's all I'm asking for. His voice carried that familiar edge, the one that surfaced whenever money entered our conversations. I sat in my worn armchair, the one his father had bought me 30 years ago, and felt my arthritic fingers grip the armrests. Daniel, I've already given you everything I could. My retirement savings are nearly gone. I can't? Clarissa, my daughter-in-law, emerged from the kitchen doorway like a designer-clad vulture. Her perfectly manicured nails caught the lamplight as she gestured dismissively. Margaret, this isn't just any vacation. This is a business cruise. Networking, investors, our future. I'd heard this song before. The startup that would change everything. The investment opportunity of a lifetime. The breakthrough that was just one more check away. Each promise had drained another piece of my financial security, another fragment of my dignity. I said no. The words came out stronger than I felt. Daniel's face transformed. The mask of the devoted son crumbled, revealing something I'd always suspected lurked beneath but had been too afraid to acknowledge. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, and before I could process what was happening, his hand connected with my face. The slap echoed through the house like a gunshot. Time seemed to fracture. I tasted copper in my mouth. My left ear rang with a high-pitched whine. But worse than the physical pain was the shattering of every maternal illusion I'd clung to for 4 decades. Then look for me, he snarled, his breath hot against my face. When you're ready to be a real mother, when you're ready to support your family instead of hoarding money like some pathetic old miser, then you can look for me. Clarissa's laugh was like breaking glass. Come on, Daniel. Let her sit here with her precious savings account. We'll find real investors who understand vision. They left me there, trembling in my chair, the side of my face burning with more than just the impact of his hand. The front door slammed with such force that my wedding china rattled in the cabinet. I sat in the darkening room as the sun set beyond my living room windows, painting the walls the color of dried blood. My hands, spotted with age and years of hard work, slowly released their death grip on the chair arms. That's when I noticed it. My old leather notebook on the side table. The one where I'd meticulously recorded every dollar, every sacrifice, every piece of myself I'd given away in the name of maternal love. I picked it up with steady hands. The trembling had stopped. In its place was something harder, colder, more certain than anything I'd felt in years. At 11:45 p.m., I pulled my old Samsonite suitcase from the closet and began to pack. Just the essentials. The notebook went in first, followed by the manila folder containing copies of every check, every wire transfer, every documented betrayal disguised as family support. As I zipped the suitcase closed, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The left side of my face had bloomed into an angry purple bruise, but my eyes held something new. I wasn't running away. I was beginning. The Sunset Motor Lodge smelled of industrial bleach and broken dreams. At $39 a night, it was all I allowed myself. A far cry from the luxury resorts I'd funded for Daniel and Clarissa's business trips. I sat on the thin mattress at 2:15 a.m., spreading the contents of my leather notebook across the faded floral bedspread like evidence at a crime scene. Each entry was written in my careful accountant's hand, blue ink documenting 23 years of financial hemorrhaging. I traced my finger down the columns, adding numbers that made my stomach turn. March 2001, $15,000, Daniel's first car. He'd sworn he needed the BMW for job interviews. August 2005, $35,000, the wedding. Clarissa had insisted on orchids flown in from Thailand. February 2009, $8,000. First business venture, artisanal dog treats. Failed in 3 months. November 2012, $45,000. IVF treatments. They'd never told me they stopped trying after the second round, pocketing the rest. June 2016, $25,000. The app that would revolutionize grocery shopping. January 2019, $30,000. Emergency investment in their consulting firm. The list went on. Each entry a memory, a moment when I'd looked into my son's eyes and believed his promises. The notebook trembled in my hands as I reached the final tally. $197,650, nearly $200,000, the price of my blindness. I closed my eyes and let the memories flood back. Daniel at 5, sobbing in my arms after scraping his knee. "Mommy will make it better," I'd whispered. Daniel at 16, caught stealing from my purse. "Everyone makes mistakes," I'd said. Daniel at 25, fired from another job. "You'll find your path," I'd assured him. When had I stopped being his mother and become his mark? The motel's ancient air conditioner wheezed to life, rustling the pages. I picked up the most recent entries, studying them with the cold clarity that comes after a slap in the face. Something was wrong with the pattern. For the past year, the requests had intensified. Not just larger amounts, but specific sums for specific purposes. Investment rounds, prototype development, market research. The language had grown sophisticated, peppered with terms I recognized from my decades in corporate accounting. I pulled out my reading glasses and examined the last 6 months more carefully. That's when I saw it. The paper trail of preparation. They hadn't just been taking my money. They'd been building something with it, something that required my financial history, my reputation, my very identity as collateral. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the struggling air conditioner. I reached for my phone, then stopped. Who would I call at 3:20 a.m.? The police? To report what? That I'd been a fool? That my son had hit me? I could already hear their polite condescension. Family disputes were messy. Elder abuse was hard to prove when the elder had willingly handed over the money. Instead, I opened my laptop, its blue glow harsh in the dim room. My fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose. Skills honed from 40 years of tracking other people's money finally turned to tracking my own. Bank statements, wire transfers, business registrations. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 LLCs registered in Delaware, a Nevada corporation, all filed within the last 18 months, all listing variations of my name as principal investor, all claiming assets I'd never seen and partnerships I'd never agreed to. Margaret A., Hale, M., Hale Investments, Hale Family Trust. They'd built an entire financial ecosystem with me as the unwitting foundation. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, pieces of a horrifying puzzle clicking into place. The cruise wasn't just another luxury vacation. The $20,000 wasn't just another cash grab. It was the final piece of something much larger. As dawn light crept through the nicotine-stained curtains, I made a decision. I closed the notebook, powered down the laptop, and reached for my phone. But instead of calling the police or a lawyer, I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't dialed in 5 years. Alden Brooks, my old colleague from Conway and Associates, where I'd spent 15 years as a senior auditor specializing in financial fraud. My finger hovered over the call button. Once I made this call, there would be no going back, no more pretending, no more mother's love to hide behind. I thought of Daniel's hand across my face, of Clarissa's crystalline laugh, of 40 years dissolved in a moment of violence. I pressed call. The coffee shop bustled with morning commuters, but I'd chosen a corner booth where conversations died before reaching other ears. Alden Brooks sat across from me, his silver beard neatly trimmed, sharp eyes studying the bruise on my face with professional detachment. "Margaret," he said quietly, sliding a manila folder across the table, "what I found is worse than you thought." I'd been nursing the same black coffee for an hour, waiting. Now my hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were glossy brochures, investor materials printed on expensive cardstock. My breath caught. There was my face. A professional headshot from my Conway and Associates days, doctored to look recent. Beneath it, Margaret Hale, angel investor and senior advisor, Neural Health Innovations. "They've been shopping this around for months," Alden said. "Your son and daughter-in-law have built an entire mythology around you." Former Fortune 500 auditor. Early investor in 3 successful startups, all fabricated? Of course. They've been using your reputation to legitimize their scheme. I flipped through the pages, each one a masterpiece of deception, testimonials I'd never given, investment history I'd never made, a biography that took the skeleton of my real career and dressed it in lies. "The cruise," I whispered. Alden nodded. "The Celestial Seas Innovation Summit, 5 days, Miami to Cozumel. They've already pre-sold 47 investors on meeting you. The legendary Margaret Hale, finally coming out of retirement to endorse her son's revolutionary healthcare AI." My phone buzzed. Daniel's number. I let it ring. "There's more," Alden continued, lowering his voice. "I have a contact at the cruise line, conference room bookings, catering orders, AV equipment rentals, all in your name. If this goes south, and it will, you're not just the victim. On paper, you're the mastermind." The phone buzzed again. This time, a text. "Mom, I'm sorry about last night. Can we talk? The cruise company needs final payment by noon." I showed Alden the message. His laugh was bitter. "Sorry for hitting you, but still needs the money. Classic." "What are my options?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "You could go to the authorities now. Try to prove you knew nothing about it, but," he gestured to the brochures, "they've been smart. Use just enough real information to make it believable. Your actual resume, your real financial background. It would be your word against theirs, and they have a paper trail." The coffee had gone cold, but I drank it anyway, letting the bitterness ground me. Through the window, I watched normal people living normal lives, unaware that a 72-year-old woman was planning the destruction of her own son. "Or," I prompted. Alden smiled then, the same smile he'd worn when we'd taken down a multi-million-dollar embezzlement ring in '98. "Or we give them exactly what they want. You go on that cruise. Margaret, you play the role they've created. And then, when they least expect it, you reveal the truth." "I'm listening." He pulled out his tablet, fingers dancing across the screen. "I still have connections at the SEC, the FBI's white-collar division, even a few journalists who'd love a story like this. We document everything, get them on record, let them hang themselves with their own rope. You're suggesting I become a double agent against my own son. I'm suggesting you save yourself from federal prison," Alden corrected, "and maybe teach him a lesson that 30 years of enabling couldn't." My phone rang again, this time. Clarissa's number. I could picture her, probably pacing their granite kitchen island, designer heels clicking against Italian tile I'd helped pay for. "I need to think," I said. "You have until noon, apparently." Alden gathered the documents, returning them to the folder. "Margaret, I've known you for 30 years. You were the best auditor I ever worked with because you could see through anyone's bullshit, except when it came to him." The words stung because they were true. I'd spent my career following money trails, exposing lies, protecting investors from exactly the kind of scheme my son was running. But I'd been blind in my own home. After Alden left, I sat in that corner booth until 11:30 a.m., watching the coffee shop empty and fill again with the lunch crowd. My phone battery died from the constant calls and texts, and I let it. At 11:45 a.m., I walked to a payphone, a relic I was surprised still existed, and dialed Daniel's number from memory. "Mom?" His voice was strained. "Where are you? I've been worried sick." "I'll pay for the cruise," I said evenly. The relief in his voice was palpable. "Oh, thank God. Mom, I knew you'd come through. Listen, about last night." On one condition, silence. I'm coming with you. The 3 weeks before the cruise passed in a blur of meticulous preparation. I'd returned home after the phone call, playing the role of the chastened mother while transforming into something else entirely behind closed doors. My spare bedroom became a war room. Bankers' boxes lined the walls, filled with 23 years of financial records. I worked through the nights, building a case that would have made my younger self proud. Every receipt, every wire transfer, every email, digitized, categorized, cross-referenced, Alden proved invaluable. We met twice a week at different locations, him bringing intelligence from his network while I provided the insider's view. Together, we constructed a timeline that revealed the full scope of Daniel and Clarissa's operation. They're not just scamming investors. Alden told me during one late-night session at his home office, they're building a pyramid. You're the foundation, but they've already recruited 2 other angel investors, both elderly, both with sterling reputations they can exploit. I studied the photographs he'd obtained. Eleanor Vance, 81, former CFO of a pharmaceutical company; Robert Huang, 77, retired venture capitalist. Both would be on the cruise. We need to warn them, I said. We will. But not yet. If Daniel suspects anything, I know. I'd become an actress in my own life, smiling at family dinners while recording conversations on the device Alden had given me, a pen that captured audio with stunning clarity, uploading directly to a secure cloud server. The hardest part was maintaining the facade when every instinct screamed to confront them. Daniel had grown increasingly affectionate as the cruise approached. The devoted son act in full swing. He brought me flowers, carnations, not roses because roses would have been too expensive. He fixed the leaking faucet he'd ignored for 2 years. He even had Clarissa cook my favorite pot roast, though she burned the edges and oversalted the gravy. You know, Mom, he said one evening, 10 days before departure, this cruise is going to change everything for us, for our family. I smiled, the pen in my breast pocket capturing every word. I'm sure it will, sweetheart. The documentation grew. Emails Alden's hacker friend had recovered from deleted folders, screenshots from investor forums where Margaret Hale had been discussed with reverence, corporate filings showing my forged signature on documents I'd never seen. But the real breakthrough came at 2:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, when I discovered Clarissa's laptop open on my kitchen counter. She'd been staying over more frequently to help with cruise preparations. Her helpful daughter-in-law act was almost as polished as Daniel's devoted son routine. The laptop was password protected, but Clarissa had made the amateur mistake of using their anniversary date. What I found made my blood run cold. Spreadsheets detailing investor profiles, with columns for net worth, gullibility score, and extraction potential. 63 names with anticipated investments totaling over $8 million. Email drafts preparing for post-cruise communications with phrases like unexpected regulatory delays and temporary fund restructuring. They weren't planning to run a company, they were planning to run away. I photographed everything, my hand steady despite the magnitude of the betrayal. In a folder labeled Exit Strategy, I found their endgame. New identities already partially established, property viewings in Costa Rica, flights booked for 3 days after the cruise ended. They were going to disappear with millions, leaving me to face the investigators, the lawsuits, the criminal charges. I closed the laptop carefully, returned it to exactly the angle I'd found it, and went back to bed. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay in the darkness, finalizing my own strategy. The next morning, I called Alden from a burner phone purchased at a gas station 20 miles from home. I need you to book passage on that cruise. I said, not as Alden Brooks, they might recognize your name from our Conway days. Already done, he replied. I'm traveling as Andrew Brennan, independent securities consultant, booked into a suite 1 deck above the conference facilities. And the FBI? Agent Sarah Foster will be embedded as a potential investor. She's very interested in meeting the legendary Margaret Hale. I smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. What about the recording equipment? Maritime law gets tricky with surveillance, but we found a workaround. You'll be hiring a personal videographer to document your triumphant return to investing. Everything recorded will be technically for your promotional materials, all legal. The fact that it captures criminal conspiracy is just a bonus. 5 days before the cruise, I visited my safety deposit box and removed the last of my liquid assets, $50,000 in cash, my emergency fund, the money I'd hidden even from Daniel. I divided it into separate envelopes, each labeled with a specific purpose in my plan. That night, Daniel and Clarissa took me to dinner at an upscale restaurant, my treat, of course. As they chatted about their vision for neural health innovations, I nodded and smiled, the pen recording everything while my mind ran through contingencies. "You know what I love most about this?" Daniel said, raising his wine glass. "It's that we're finally doing this as a family. The Hale legacy, continuing into the next generation." I raised my own glass, meeting his eyes. "To family," I said, "and to getting exactly what we deserve." The celestial seas rose from Miami's port like a floating palace of glass and steel, 17 decks of manufactured luxury, each detail designed to intoxicate the wealthy with possibility. I stood at the embarkation ramp, designer luggage at my feet, purchased by Daniel to ensure I looked the part, watching my son and daughter-in-law work the crowd already forming. They were magnificent predators. Daniel in his tailored navy suit, Clarissa in a cream ensemble that whispered money without shouting it. They moved through the gathering investors like sharks through schools of fish, all handshakes and calculated charm. "Mrs. Hale," a young man with an iPad and a crew badge approached. "I'm Marcus, your personal videographer for the voyage. Mr. Brennan arranged for me to document your investment summit experience." I smiled at Alden's efficiency. Marcus was DEA, on loan to the FBI for this operation, his cameras carrying far more than artistic intent. "How wonderful," I said, slipping into character. "Please, make sure you capture everything. This is such an important moment for our family's business." The ship's interior was a study in excess. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of a Miami growing smaller by the minute. The Innovation Summit had taken over decks 7 through 9, with conference rooms renamed for tech giants and innovation hubs. Our suite, the Admiral's penthouse, occupied half of Deck 15. Daniel had insisted on the best, billing it as necessary for serious investor meetings. The irony wasn't lost on me that my money had purchased the stage for my own destruction. "Isn't it perfect?" Clarissa gushed, throwing open the balcony doors. "Daniel, show your mother the setup in the main conference room. The AV team has outdone themselves." As we toured the facilities, I cataloged every detail. The main presentation hall could hold 200, with state-of-the-art projection systems and recording equipment. Smaller breakout rooms lined the corridor, each named after a successful startup. The bitter joke was that half these companies had failed within 2 years, but their names still carried the shine of initial promise. "And this," Daniel said, opening double doors with a flourish, "is where the magic happens, the executive boardroom, invitation only, for serious investors ready to commit." Table 9. Alden's intelligence had been correct. The room was set for an intimate gathering, 12 seats around a mahogany table. Hidden recording devices already in place courtesy of our FBI friends. The first evening's reception was a masterclass in manipulation. Daniel and Clarissa had curated the guest list perfectly. A mix of legitimate wealth seeking the next big thing and desperate retirees hoping to multiply their nest eggs. I recognized Eleanor Vance immediately, her regal bearing undermined by the tremor in her hands as she clutched her champagne flute. "Mrs. Hale," she said, approaching me near the seafood station. "I've heard so much about your investment acumen. Your son says you were instrumental in identifying early opportunities in biotech." The lie came smoothly. They always do when you've rehearsed them. One develops an instinct over the years, though I find the best investments are always in people you trust. Across the room, Robert Huang held court with a group of younger investors. his stories of Silicon Valley's golden age drawing an eager audience. Both my fellow angel investors were playing their parts, unaware they were cast members in their own tragedy. Marcus shadowed me discreetly, his cameras capturing the choreographed dance of deceit. I watched Daniel work the room, noting how he touched each person he spoke to, a hand on the shoulder, a pat on the arm. The physical contact of a confidence man, creating intimacy where none existed. By 10:30 p.m., the first distribution of investor packets began. Glossy folders containing promises backed by my reputation, my falsified endorsements, my manufactured success stories. I accepted my copy with appropriate gravitas, flipping through pages that detailed how neural health innovations would revolutionize preventive medicine through AI-driven diagnostics. The algorithm is proprietary, Clarissa explained to a cluster of interested parties. But Margaret here was the first to recognize its potential. Her background in financial analysis gave her unique insight into the healthcare market's inefficiencies. I nodded sagely, remembering the nights I'd spent researching enough buzzwords to play this part convincingly. Machine learning, predictive analytics, blockchain integration, empty terms that meant everything and nothing, depending on the depth of the listener's pockets. The ship's engines hummed beneath us, carrying us further from shore and deeper into the trap my son had set. Through the ballroom's windows, Miami's lights had shrunk to a glittering line on the horizon. International waters by morning, where jurisdiction became complicated and evidence became crucial. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel's voice rang out over the microphone. "Welcome aboard the celestial seas and to the future of healthcare investment. Over the next 5 days, you'll have the exclusive opportunity to join a revolution. But tonight," he raised his glass, "tonight we celebrate the visionaries willing to sail beyond the conventional." The room erupted in applause. I raised my own glass, catching Alden's eye where he stood near the bar, playing the role of intrigued outsider. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Later, in the privacy of my suite, I stood on the balcony watching the ship's wake disappear into darkness. Somewhere below, Daniel and Clarissa were probably congratulating themselves on a perfect opening night. They had no idea that every word, every gesture, every fraudulent promise had been captured. Marcus appeared beside me, removing a memory card from his camera. "Excellent footage tonight, Mrs. Hale. Your son is quite the showman." "Yes," I agreed, pocketing the card. He's always been very good at putting on a performance. The main presentation hall thrummed with anticipation on night 3 of the cruise. 2 days of smaller sessions had built to this moment, the formal unveiling of neural health innovations to the assembled investors. The stage was set with holographic displays, the company logo rotating in 3-dimensional glory above Daniel and Clarissa's heads. I sat in the 3rd row, perfectly positioned where the cameras could capture both my reactions and the stage. Eleanor Vance was to my left, Robert Huang 2 seats to my right. The other angel investors, unknowing pawns in their own financial destruction. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel began, his voice carrying the practiced confidence of a man who'd been rehearsing lies in the mirror. "Tonight, we don't just share a business opportunity. We share a revolution in human wellness." The lights dimmed, and a presentation began. Slick graphics showing AI neural networks, patient data flowing through colorful pipelines, mortality rates plummeting under the influence of their non-existent algorithm. Clarissa took the stage next, walking through financial projections that would have made Bernie Madoff blush. "With just our initial angel investors," she gestured to our section, "we validated the model. Margaret Hale's involvement alone has opened doors we never imagined possible." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt eyes on me, evaluating, calculating. The legendary Margaret Hale, whose name appeared on every piece of marketing material, whose fabricated endorsement anchored their credibility. 40 minutes into the presentation, they reached the crescendo. Daniel clicked to a slide showing investment tiers, each with astronomical returns projected over 5 years. The Founder's Circle, limited to tonight only, requires a minimum investment of $500,000. The Innovation tier starts at $200,000, but for those ready to truly transform healthcare, another click. The Visionary level, at $1 million, includes board positions and direct algorithm access. The room exploded with questions. Eager hands shot up, voices overlapping with inquiries about SEC compliance, patent status, beta testing results. Daniel and Clarissa fielded them expertly, their answers peppered with enough technical jargon to sound substantial while revealing nothing. Then it happened. At exactly 9:45 p.m., Marcus gave the signal, a subtle adjustment of his camera angle. Time for the reveal. But first, one more piece of theater. I'd like to address something, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a more intimate register. Some of you have asked why my mother, despite her crucial early support, hasn't taken a more visible role until now. The truth is, he paused. Manufacturing emotion. She's been battling health challenges, the very challenges our technology aims to prevent. I felt the room's sympathy shift toward me like a tide. Clarissa picked up the thread. Which is why Margaret's involvement isn't just professional, it's personal. She's seen firsthand how traditional healthcare fails our seniors. Her investment isn't just financial, it's hope. The performance was so polished, so perfectly cynical, that for a moment even I almost believed it. Around me, checkbooks were already emerging. Robert Huang stood up. I'm ready to commit tonight. $500,000 for the Founder's Circle. $600,000, Eleanor Vance called out, her voice steady despite her frailty. My husband died of a preventable condition. This technology could save lives. The feeding frenzy began. Numbers flew across the room as investors tried to outbid each other for positions that didn't exist in a company that would never operate. Daniel's eyes gleamed with barely concealed greed while Clarissa frantically scribbled commitment figures on her tablet. $1 million! A voice called from the back. Agent Foster, playing her role as a wealthy tech heiress. But I want to see more technical details. Perhaps a private demonstration? Of course, Daniel agreed quickly. Tomorrow evening, the executive boardroom, table 9. We'll show you everything. I stood slowly, letting Marcus's cameras track my movement. The room fell silent, waiting for the legendary Margaret Hale to speak. I'm so proud, I began, my voice carrying the weight of a mother's love and a victim's pain, to see my son's vision finally reaching those who can appreciate it. The technology behind neural health is... I paused, meeting Daniel's eyes. Revolutionary, transformative, some might even say unbelievable. Applause thundered through the hall. Daniel beamed, missing the edge in my words, too drunk on success to notice the trap closing around him. The session concluded with signed letters of intent worth over $6 million. Investors crowded the stage, eager to shake hands with the visionaries who would make them rich. I watched from my seat as my son worked the room, each handshake another link in the chain of evidence. Later, in the corridor outside, I overheard Daniel on the phone, his voice carrying through the thin walls. Yes, the old bat played her part perfectly. By tomorrow night, we'll have enough to disappear for good. Costa Rica, just like we planned. I didn't flinch. Marcus, standing nearby with his equipment, had captured every word. At 11:50 p.m., I met Alden and Agent Foster in a service corridor far from the passenger areas. Tomorrow's the finale, Foster confirmed. We'll have a full tactical team in international waters by morning. The moment they take actual money, not just pledges, we move. What about Eleanor and Robert, I asked. They're about to lose everything. We've got their investments covered, Alden assured me. The FBI's asset forfeiture fund will make them whole. Everyone except Daniel and Clarissa. I finished. I know. Foster studied me with the calculating gaze of someone who'd seen too many family crimes. Are you ready for this? Mrs. Hale? Once we move, there's no taking it back. I thought of the slap. The bruise had faded, but the memory burned fresh. 23 years of sacrifice repaid with violence and betrayal. I've been ready since the moment my son decided I was nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. Tomorrow would bring the end. But tonight. I returned to my suite and stood on the balcony, watching stars reflect on the endless ocean. Somewhere on this ship, Daniel and Clarissa were celebrating their imminent wealth. Let them celebrate. Morning always comes, and with it, truth has a way of surfacing, even in the deepest waters. The executive boardroom at 8 p.m. on the final night was a stage set for revelation. Crystal decanters caught the light from the chandeliers, casting rainbow fragments across the mahogany table where 12 investors had gathered for the exclusive technical demonstration. Daniel and Clarissa stood at the head of the room, a projection screen behind them displaying the Neural Health logo in perpetual rotation. I sat at table 9, the recording equipment hidden within the carved base, already capturing every word. To my left, Agent Foster maintained her cover as the eager tech heiress. To my right, Robert Huang clutched his checkbook with trembling fingers. "Thank you all for joining us," Daniel began, his confidence radiant. "Tonight, you become more than investors. You become pioneers." Clarissa dimmed the lights, clicking through slides showing fabricated beta test results. Phantom partnerships with hospitals that had never heard of Neural Health, and regulatory approvals that existed only in Photoshop. The algorithm's predictive accuracy reaches 97%. She lied smoothly. "We've already saved 43 lives in trials." "Remarkable," Eleanor Vance breathed. "And the FDA approval?" "Fast-tracked," Daniel assured her, "thanks to Margaret's connections from her pharmaceutical days." All eyes turned to me. I smiled. The proud mother, the experienced investor, the perfect mark who had become the perfect weapon. The potential is limitless. I confirmed. "Which is why I've already transferred my final investment." Daniel's eyes lit up with greed so naked it was almost pitiful. Mother's commitment of an additional $300,000 brings our total seed funding to... The boardroom doors burst open. FBI. Everyone remained seated. The transformation was instant. Crystal decanters forgotten, checkbooks scattered, the veneer of luxury cracking to reveal the crime scene beneath. Agent Foster stood, her badge now visible, while tactical team members filed in with practiced precision. Daniel's face cycled through confusion, anger, and finally desperate comprehension. "Mom?" I stood slowly, my hand resting on the carved table that had recorded every damning word. "I told you I was proud of your vision. Daniel, so proud that I wanted to make sure everyone knew exactly what you'd built." "You set us up?" Clarissa's voice cracked, her composure shattering. You're his mother." "I was," I corrected. "Until he decided I was just an ATM. Until he hit me for refusing to fund his fraud one more time. That's not... We never..." Daniel stammered, but the agents were already moving. Marcus appeared with his cameras, the devices that had captured 3 days of criminal conspiracy. On the projection screen, the Neural Health logo was replaced by surveillance footage. Daniel and Clarissa discussing their exit strategy, mocking the gullible Marks, planning their escape to Costa Rica. Then came the audio from Table 9, their own voices, captured in crystal clarity, admitting to the fraud, laughing about the old bat who'd funded their scheme, detailing exactly how they'd forged my signatures and manufactured my endorsements. "No," Daniel whispered, watching his own words condemn him. "No, you don't understand. It was just... We were going to pay everyone back." "From Costa Rica?" I asked. "With the new identities you'd already purchased? With the $8 million you were planning to steal from these people?" Eleanor Vance stood shakily, supported by an agent. "Is it all lies, the technology, the trials?" "Everything," Agent Foster confirmed. "Neural Health Innovations exists only on paper and in marketing materials. There is no algorithm. There is no technology. There is only theft." Robert Huang sank into his chair, the magnitude of his near loss washing over him. Around the table, other investors processed their narrow escape from financial ruin. The agents cuffed Daniel first. As they pulled his arms behind his back, he looked at me with eyes that finally showed the truth. Not the devoted son, not the visionary entrepreneur, but the parasite who'd fed on maternal love until there was nothing left but appetite. "How could you do this to me?" he asked. "I'm your son." "You were," I said, my voice steady as granite. "My son died the moment you raised your hand to me. What's left is just a criminal who happened to share my DNA." Clarissa tried to run, her designer heels slipping on the polished floor. She made it 3 steps before an agent caught her, the beautiful facade crumbling into desperate tears. "Please," she begged me. "We have children to think about." "No," I cut her off. "You have yourselves to think about. You always have." As they were led away, Daniel turned back one last time. The fury in his eyes had given way to something else, perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in years. Fear. "They'll come after you too," he said. "For your part in this. You funded it all." Agent Foster stepped forward. "Mrs. Hale has been cooperating with federal authorities for weeks. Every dollar she provided was tracked. Every transaction monitored. She's not just a witness. She's a hero who prevented millions in losses." The boardroom emptied slowly, investors shepherded out by agents who would take their statements and return their would-be investments. Eleanor Vance paused beside me on her way out. "Thank you," she whispered. "My husband's life insurance. It's all I have. You saved me from losing everything." After she left, I stood alone in the boardroom with Alden and Agent Foster. The hidden recording equipment was being dismantled, the evidence cataloged. On the projection screen, someone had left the arrest warrant display. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, 25 to life. "Any regrets?" Alden asked softly. I thought about the question, really considered it. Somewhere on this ship, my son sat in federal custody, his grand scheme reduced to a cautionary tale. The man who'd slapped me for refusing to enable him one more time would spend decades remembering this moment. "Just one," I admitted. "I wish I'd done it sooner." Through the boardroom windows, I could see the lights of Fort Lauderdale approaching. The cruise was ending where it began, but everything had changed. The woman who'd boarded 5 days ago, the enabling mother, the willing victim, the silent sufferer, was gone. In her place stood Margaret Hale, not the mark, but the hunter, not the victim, but the voice that had finally said, "Enough." The ship's horn sounded, announcing our return to port. Time to dock. Time for Daniel and Clarissa to face justice. Time for me to finally be free. The port of Miami stretched before me in the early morning light, painted gold and coral by the rising sun. I stood on the dock, my single suitcase beside me, watching the celestial seas discharge its passengers. Most hurried past, eager to return to their lives, unaware of the drama that had unfolded in the executive boardroom just hours before. Daniel and Clarissa had been removed earlier, transferred directly from the ship's holding area to federal custody. I hadn't watched them go. That chapter was closed, sealed with handcuffs and Miranda rights. "Mrs. Hale?" I turned to find Marcus, Agent Marcus Chen, I'd learned, approaching with a small package. "The memory cards from the entire voyage," he said, handing them to me. "The FBI has copies, of course, but Agent Foster thought you might want these for closure." I accepted the package, its weight negligible compared to what it represented. 5 days of evidence, 5 days of transformation, 5 days that had dismantled 23 years of delusion. "What will you do now?" he asked. It was a question I'd been pondering since 4 a.m., standing on my suite balcony for the last time. The sunrise had been spectacular, painting the ocean in shades of possibility. "First, I'm going to have breakfast," I said. "Real breakfast, not the continental nonsense they serve to impress investors. Then I'm going to call a real estate agent." "Selling the house?" "Everything," I confirmed. "The house, the furniture, the memories, especially the memories." A taxi pulled up, and I moved toward it. Marcus helped with my suitcase, lighter now than when I'd boarded. I'd left behind the designer clothes Daniel had insisted I wear, the jewelry meant to impress, the props of a role I no longer played. "For what it's worth," Marcus said as I settled into the back seat. You did the right thing. Not many parents could have done what you did. That's just it, I replied. I stopped being his parent the moment he decided I was nothing more than a resource to exploit. What I did on that ship, that wasn't a mother's choice. That was a survivor's. The taxi pulled away, leaving the port behind. Through the rear window, I watched the celestial seas shrink into the distance, a gleaming monument to greed and deception. Somewhere in federal processing, my son was learning that actions have consequences, that even mother's love has limits, that you cannot build an empire on the bones of those who raised you. My phone buzzed. Alden, checking in. Then Agent Foster, confirming the asset forfeiture paperwork. Eleanor Vance, expressing gratitude again. Robert Huang, inviting me to lunch to share war stories of cons avoided. I silenced them all. There would be time for depositions and testimonies, for paperwork and procedures. But this morning belonged to me. The taxi driver glanced at me in the mirror. Coming back from vacation? No, I said, surprising myself with a laugh. Just coming back to myself. We drove through Miami as the city woke up, past normal people living normal lives, unaware that a 72-year-old woman had just orchestrated the downfall of her own son. The bruise on my face had long since faded, but I touched the spot where his hand had landed, a phantom pain that served as a reminder. That slap had been meant to break me. Instead, it had broken the chains. At a red light, I pulled out the leather notebook that had started it all, the meticulous records of money given, trust betrayed, love exploited. I rolled down the window and held it out, letting the Miami morning breeze rifle through its pages one last time. Then I let it go. The notebook tumbled into a garbage bin on the corner, its pages scattering like moths freed from a killing jar. 23 years of financial abuse, documented and discarded. I didn't need those records anymore. The FBI had everything they required, and I had something more valuable than evidence. I had freedom. The taxi continued north, toward a future I couldn't yet see, but was finally free to shape. Behind me, the sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of the night. I thought about Daniel, waking up in a federal cell, his grand illusions replaced by concrete walls and iron bars. I thought about Clarissa, her designer clothes traded for prison orange, her schemes reduced to desperate plea bargains. Did I feel guilty? The mother I'd been for 40 years would have been destroyed by guilt, but that woman had died with a slap, been buried at sea, and resurrected as something harder, clearer, more honest. I felt nothing but relief. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Hale, this is Amy from First National Real Estate. I can meet you at 9 a.m. to discuss listing your property. 9 a.m. In 2 hours, I would begin dismantling the physical remnants of a life built on enabling destructive behavior. The house where I'd raised a son who saw me as nothing more than a credit line. The rooms where I'd counted out money for another failed venture, another broken promise, another exploitation of trust. All of it would go, and from the ashes, something new would rise. The taxi pulled up to a small cafe I'd never visited before, a deliberate choice. Somewhere Daniel had never been, would never be. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the smell of coffee and possibility. Inside, I ordered eggs over easy, wheat toast, and the strongest coffee they served. The waitress, a woman about Daniel's age, smiled as she poured. "Starting your day off right?" "I see. Starting my life off right," I corrected. She laughed, not understanding, and moved on to other customers. I sat in my booth, watching the world pass by outside, and pulled out a small notepad, new, unmarked by history. On the first page, I wrote a single line. Chapter 1, The Woman Who Said No. Because that's who I was now. Not the mother who gave everything, but the woman who finally said no. Not the victim who suffered in silence, but the survivor who spoke truth into corruption. The coffee was perfect, strong, bitter, real. I sipped it slowly, savoring the taste of a morning that belonged entirely to me. No demands for money, No manipulation disguised as love, no slaps for refusing to enable one more scheme. Just me, Margaret Hale, 72 years old and finally free. The sun climbed higher, painting the cafe in warm light. Somewhere, federal prosecutors were building their case. Somewhere, investors were breathing sighs of relief. Somewhere, my son was learning that mothers are not infinite resources, that love is not a blank check, that there are consequences for treating the woman who gave you life as nothing more than a financial institution. But here, in this moment, in this cafe, with this coffee and this blank notepad, I was exactly where I needed to be. The woman who had boarded the celestial seas was gone, lost somewhere in international waters along with false promises and fabricated dreams. The woman who sat here now was someone new, someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable destruction, even when that destruction wears your son's face. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to Eleanor Vance and her saved retirement, to Robert Huang and his preserved dignity, to all the victims who wouldn't be created because I'd finally found my voice, and most of all, to the woman in the mirror who discovered that 72 was not too old to start over, that bruises fade but self-respect endures, that saying no can be the most powerful word in any language. The waitress returned with my eggs. They were perfect, the yolks golden and waiting to spill across the plate. I picked up my fork and began to eat, each bite a small celebration of a life reclaimed, outside. Miami pulsed with its usual energy, inside. I sat with my breakfast and my blank notepad, ready to write whatever came next. The story of the mother who gave everything was over. The story of the woman who took it all back had just begun. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts on Margaret's journey. Your perspectives and experiences make these stories richer for everyone.